So today I'm finishing my reaction to Jeremy Clarkson's The Victoria Cross for Valor, which is on the channel North 1, but because that version has all these copyright issues, I'm going to react to it on the Timeline channel. Let's get to it.
In Holland in 1944, Major Robert Kaine had been tested twice, but worse was to come. This was the picture at Arnhem. 40 miles to the south, the Second Army, seen here in red, was bogged down. And with reinforcements unable to get through, the men holding the north end of the bridge were soon to surrender. Kaine and the remaining airborne troops were ordered to pull back 3 miles west to the village of Oosterbeek. A horseshoe of defences was then erected in the hope of holding off the Germans until the Second Army could break through. So, picture the scene. Try to put yourself in the head of someone who was here that day. You were part of the largest airborne assault ever, but your mission has been a complete failure. That's the first thing. You were supposed to have been here 2 days, but you've been here for 4. You landed with 12,000 men, but at this point only 3,900 are left. So it's almost certain that you've watched close friends get killed. You've been fighting pretty much non-stop for those last 4 days, so it's unlikely you've had any sleep. You've no food. You're low on ammunition, and the Germans have cut off the water supply to the village that you're holed up in. And there's no way out of the village because you're surrounded on all sides by tanks and artillery and mortars and flamethrowers and 6,000 German troops. And then someone gets a radio working, and you find out that the Second Army, which was supposed to have been here 2 days earlier, is still 5 days away. Imagine how that must have felt. That sense of desolation and isolation, that sense of, well, we're going to die here.
I couldn't imagine.
To make matters even worse, the RAF was dropping vital supplies of food and ammunition at prearranged landing zones, not realizing they'd been overrun by Germans. The British soldiers in Oosterbeek actually watched almost 90% of the drops fall into enemy hands. So the Germans must have felt optimistic, but they were reckoning without Robert Kaine.
Can't imagine how frustrating that would have been.
His job was to defend the tip of the horseshoe by the river. This was the short straw, because if the Germans came through here, they'd cut everyone off, and the Brits would be finished. That night, an eerie silence descended on the bridge. Everyone knew that meant the British holding the north end had finally surrendered, and as a result, the Germans could now turn all their attention to the siege of Oosterbeek. What's more, as the British forces grew weaker, the Germans were being reinforced with men and equipment from home. Equipment that included their most formidable battle weapon.
Tiger?
The Tiger tank was the king of the German divisions, the biggest armoured vehicle they'd ever made. It weighed 57 tons. Its armour plating was 4 inches thick. The shells it fired were from an 88mm gun. It could blow anything to Kingdom Come with complete impunity.
So the long length of the barrel actually allowed it to fire with increased velocity, as well as pierce through the armor of the American Sherman tanks, and I want to say the Soviet T-35 tanks. I'm not sure though, but it could actually pierce through armor even at long distances.
And a herd of them was headed straight for Kaine's position. On the second day of the siege, a Tiger tank rumbled down the street at the top of that bank over there. Now, Major Kaine was down here on this piece of waste ground, armed with a Piat gun. Now, British troops hated these things. It was a botched piece of design. It was heavy, it was ungainly, it was inaccurate, and the shell it fired was virtually useless against all known sorts of German armour. And those were the good things about it. The bad thing was trying to cock it. You had to stand on the end like that and then pull it up to tighten the spring, which isn't so bad now because the spring's 60 years old and quite weak. But back then that would often take 2 guys. And then, once it was done, you had to seat the shell, which meant feeding it in like this. It's immensely fiddly even today, so what it must have been like when you had 50 tons of Tiger tank bearing down on you. Isn't bear thinking about.
I've never even heard of that weapon before.
Kaine managed to load the Piat by himself and take up position behind a little hut. He waited for the Tiger to be 30 yards away, took aim and fired. It was a good shot. The shell went right underneath the tank and blew up, causing no damage whatsoever. All it did was alert the crew inside to the fact that he was there. A shell from the tank's 88mm gun blew the hut to smithereens, but at the last second, Kaine grabbed his Piat gun and ran for cover past the tank's machine gun to a laundry. And once he got there, he reloaded the Piat and got ready to fire it again. The second shot was as good as the first, but the effect was exactly the same as well. Nothing. So the tank turned its gun again and fired again. And this time it killed Kaine's spotter, Lieutenant Ian Meikler. Now, at this point, a sane man would have got out of there. But you've got to remember, Kaine had lost 100 of his men by this stage. He wasn't in the mood for getting out. So, as the dust cleared, no one could quite believe their eyes, because he was lying in completely open ground, facing down a Tiger tank.
I was close enough to see exactly what happened. I think he altered his position to kneeling, and we can see in the distance a tank. I was absolutely certain he was going to die there. Kept on shouting, "Load, load," and firing at the tank.
Considering that he's had such good accuracy so far, I'm sure this was going to be a good shot. So what makes this even more remarkable is the fact that he is putting in these accurate shots all while his adrenaline is surging, his heart is racing, and he's breathing fast. Yet somehow he's still able to do this. Very impressive.
He fired for a third time, and this time his shell hit the Tiger's only Achilles heel. He blew one of its tracks off, immobilizing it.
And you could see the track of the tank come away and lob on its sides.
Kaine had no time to celebrate, though, because almost immediately another Tiger rolled into view on the road up there. He dived behind the wall of the laundry again, reloaded his Piat again, and then stepped out to take a shot at it. But he pulled the trigger a fraction of a second too soon. So the shell clipped the wall of the laundry and blew up just a few feet in front of his face.
There was a flash, and he immediately fell over. And it was horrifying. When I got to him, his face was black, but totally black, and with little spots of blood all the way around. What, 30, 40, 50, whatever it was. And he was saying, I'm blind, I can't see. So several of his men carried him away to the copse.
Cops?
10, 15 yards away.
What's
I
that?
Stayed with him no more than 6 or 7 paces, I shouldn't think, holding his hand.
It seemed like he was finished. But 45 minutes later, he was back. His sight had returned, and that was enough. The shrapnel wounds he would cope with.
And this chap came out of the copse with his face blackened. And he got down immediately on the Piat gun. I was staggered, utterly staggered. I thought, well, he must be a very brave man to be knocked out, probably, and then come back and take up the same position and still hit tanks. I couldn't understand why such a brave man didn't say, well, I've had enough. He'd done his lot and still kept going. But it was still firing when we left.
By the end of that day, day 2 of the siege, Kaine, according to eyewitnesses, had destroyed 3 tanks. No one had ever done that before. He had begun to win his VC.
Well, now he knew what the weak point was, and that was the tracks. But did you hear that veteran whose voice kind of broke at the end, saying that when they left, he was still firing? Yeah, it's still very real for him.
This lump of bronze is only big enough to produce 80 more medals. But there's no need to panic about it running out just yet, because over the years it's become harder and harder to win a Victoria Cross. In the early days, simply whirling your sword at a heathen was often enough, but that changed toward the end of the First World War, and the figures back this up. In World War I, 634 medals were awarded, but in World War II, that dropped to just 182. The bar had been raised to an almost impossible height.
During the Arnhem battle, a glider pilot called Lieutenant Mike Dauncey found himself defending a sector very close to where Robert Kaine was. Here's the report. It says the position was continually attacked by superior forces of enemy tanks and infantry. On 3 occasions, the enemy overran the sector, necessitating a counterattack. Dauncey led each sortie with such determination that the positions were regained with heavy loss to the enemy. In the face of heavy small arms and mortar fire, he personally attacked machine gun posts with complete disregard for his own safety. The next day, the Germans attacked again with tanks and self-propelled guns. This time, Dauncey lost the sight of one eye. In spite of the pain, though, he refused to be evacuated. And then on the next day, they came back with tanks again. His men withdrew, and he was left alone, facing down a tank. He threw a gammon bomb through its hatch and blew it up. Now, for this, he was recommended for a VC, but they turned him down. That's how hard it had become to win one.
Since the end of the Second World War to the present day, only 11 VCs have been won, and this creates a problem. The fewer VC winners there are, the greater the burden of living in its spotlight.
I'd sooner have back with me the pals, my buddies, my comrades back with me, rather than any medal.
In 1951, Private William Speakman was part of a battalion of the Black Watch Regiment defending a hilltop in Korea. The hill was attacked by 6,000 Chinese soldiers, and with the Black Watch troops outnumbered by 12 to 1, the situation looked bleak. But as the hill was about to be overrun, Speakman appeared like a 6'4" human grenade launcher.
And I thought, well, all this stuff has been done. We've primed them. I might as well use the bloody things, you know. So that's it. And we went up there and we just did it.
10 times he went back for more grenades, and then when they ran out, he lobbed beer bottles and ration tins at the Chinese, anything he could get his hands on. Eventually the attack was broken, and Speakman was a hero, but he found it hard to cope with the attention the VC brought. He told one reporter that the medal made him feel like a freak in a freak show.
Sometimes it gets a little bit too much. Not sometimes, a lot of the time it gets too much. People try to do something for you. They try to say thank you in their own little way. They say, well, tell me what happened. You either don't want to, or sometimes you just say, well, no, I've forgotten all about it now. And that's the truth. It's a bit overwhelming for an ordinary person.
Many or most combat veterans have a hard time talking about their experiences because when they do open up, they have to actually relive it, which can be even more traumatic. So as an Iraq veteran, I want to ask that you do something. If you ever meet a combat veteran, please don't ask them questions such as, why did you receive that award? Or did you kill anyone? Instead, what you could ask them is, I see you're wearing an award. Can you tell me what the award is called? Or you could say, I know you fought in the Iraq War. Can you tell me what kind of a weapon you used or where in Iraq you actually served? these questions are more broad, and it makes it easier for veterans to open up a little bit without the veteran getting flashbacks or having to relive the trauma that they went through.
The difficulty with the Victoria Cross, or an award of that standing being awarded, is you were just beginning to get over the shock and the horror of what you've been through. And then you're given this award and you have to relive it all over again, probably for the rest of your life, because people will be asking you about it for the rest of your life. They're just incredible people. I'm being soft about them because they were tough men that day. But when I first started being involved with the association, there were 450 alive, and now there are only 15. So there's been a lot of sadness. But we've had some incredible times together.
I wonder how long she's been with the association. Falklands.
The last two VCs, both posthumous, were won in the Falklands War 21 years ago. And the reason it's been such a long time is quite straightforward.
So I think this is an older video, but there have been at least 4 Victoria Cross recipients for the Iraq and Afghanistan wars.
Modern warfare with remote control weapon systems arguably separates you from the enemy in a way that hasn't happened in past wars.
Drones too.
It gives you an idea of how rarely you can justify a VC and how infrequently the opportunity, and it doesn't need an opportunity, the opportunity to win a VC comes past your door.
The days of soldiers sticking their heads above the parapet and taking out half the enemy with nothing but a fruit knife are gone. The days of soldiers like this man, Gurkha rifleman Lakiman Gurung.
In Burma, on May the 13th, 1945, Gurung was manning the most forward post of his platoon when 200 Japanese soldiers attacked the position. Grenades were thrown into his trench, which Rifleman Gurung snatched up and threw back. Unfortunately, the third grenade exploded in his hand, blowing off his fingers, shattering his right arm, and severely wounding him in the face, body, and right leg. For the next 4 hours, wave after wave of fanatical attacks were thrown in by the enemy, and all were repulsed. Even though Gurung, alone in his trench, had to load and fire his rifle using only his left hand. Of the 87 enemy dead counted in the vicinity after the battle, 31 lay in front of Gurung's position. 31.
Now I'm getting emotional. Okay.
So, is the greatest medal in the world in danger of becoming extinct? Will those 7 in the safe at Hancock's Jewelers ever be engraved?
I think it would be quite wrong to say that there will never be an opportunity for a Victoria Cross to be won in future warfare. There will be opportunities. There will always be personal braveries in an intensive operation, a long drawn-out operation, that deserves that reward.
There would be certainly plenty in this generation who would be candidates for being awarded the Victoria Cross. Courage isn't lost from mankind. It's just the circumstances.
Back on the banks of the Rhine, Major Robert Kaine was into the 3rd day of the siege of Oosterbeek, and the Germans had changed their tactics. Possibly fed up with losing so many tanks, they decided to batter the British into submission with constant shelling and mortar fire. The Germans, by this stage, had ringed the British positions with 100 artillery guns, along with 12 of the dreaded Nebelwerfers, multi-barreled mortars which fired 6 bombs at a time. Somehow this bombardment seemed to inspire Kaine, driving him to ever greater feats of bravery. While most of the troops kept their heads down and their fingers crossed, hoping a shell wouldn't land on them, he went in search of tanks. Witnesses spoke of a madman running through a hailstorm of fire in these very streets, with his trousers torn off, blood pouring from wounds in his legs, firing his Piat at tank after tank after tank.
And they said he's firing, some were saying he's firing the Piat from the hip, like a bloody cowboy.
There was this figure, wounded, bandaged, dirty, dishevelled, but still coming round, still wherever the point of danger was, still encouraging the men all the time.
Some were saying he'd knocked 4, 5, 6 tanks out.
Yeah, you can put yourself in the Germans' position and saying, whoever's knocking out these tanks must be, well, someone out of this world, I'll say.
In his diary, he says his feet felt like they had 1,000 pins sticking in them and that his socks filled with blood. Later in the day, he says he felt something hot and sticky running down the side of his face. Turns out he'd fired so many shells, one of his eardrums had burst.
He disregarded his own wounds. He was wounded, seriously wounded and bleeding and torn to shreds, yet he fought on because that was his duty. He refused to go back for medical treatment until there was a lull in the battle. He fought with a total focus on what he was meant to be doing, and many VC holders have this sense of focus. They have a focus that sees that clearly what they've got to do, and they must do that regardless of the effect it has on his own life. And this selflessness is perhaps the key issue in winning a VC.
To understand just how important this business of selflessness is, you need to know the story of John Cruikshank.
Cruikshank was the captain of a Catalina flying boat, which was very badly shot up during a suicidal attack on a U-boat. Although he sank the U-boat, one of his crew was killed, 3 others injured, and Cruikshank himself was hit 72 times, including wounds to both lungs. So there he is, with his lungs hemorrhaging, slipping in and out of consciousness and barely able to breathe. But he was determined to bring the wounded crew home safely, so he kept the plane in the air for an hour until the sea conditions were safe enough for a landing. And that's an amazing story, but it's not as amazing as what the Secretary of State has written here. He says, "I think that the VC has been earned in this case, although an element of self-preservation enters into it." And that's the tricky bit. You see, if you're the captain of an aeroplane, you bring it back and therefore save the lives of everyone on board. You also save your own life. You can't really win.
So did he actually receive it or not?
Arnhem was a lost cause too. There were so many wounded British soldiers by the 4th day of the siege that the Germans sportingly arranged a ceasefire so they could be evacuated.
I know there were brief truces and ceasefires in World War I, but I had no clue that any actually happened in the Second World War, especially organized by the Germans, so that's interesting.
Kaine could have gone. He was a wreck. He was half blind, he was half deaf, his legs were perforated with machine gun and shrapnel wounds. But he chose to stay, and that meant he was still here on the 5th day of the siege. This, in the Germans' eyes, was doomsday, the day when they'd mount their biggest push. They threw everything at the British: tanks, artillery, flamethrowers, mortars, the lot. The British had arrived in Arnhem with supplies for 3 days. This was their 9th and the 5th in the hell of Oosterbeek. It was shaping up to be the shortest firefight in history. But Major Kaine had other ideas. Kaine found himself down by the church, and pretty soon he was out of ammunition for his Piat. So he switched to a mortar like this. Now, the idea of a mortar is that you jam it into the ground, you drop the shell into the tube, it fires up in the air and lands on the German positions. But the Germans were so close that he was firing it like this, like a normal gun. Now imagine what that must have looked like from a German's point of view. This Man, with his trousers blown off, caked in blood, with sticky stuff coming down the side of his face, firing a mortar horizontally at you. It must have been unnerving.
Wow.
In Kaine's VC citation, it says of the events of that day, by a skillful use of this weapon and his daring leadership of the few men still under his command, he completely demoralized the enemy, who, after an engagement lasting more than 3 hours, withdrew in disorder. Robert Kaine had turned the tide in the battle, and this is another vital factor in winning a Victoria Cross. Your actions have to create a ripple effect. They have to help save the day.
On the Monday, it was the final day of the battle, and the Germans, that was 9th SS Panzer Division, have been trying since the Friday to break Major Kaine's block, because that was the key to cutting us off from the whole division off from the river, and we would have been finished. We all knew that. I mean, it was obvious to us all, but he made sure that they didn't get through, to his great credit.
His action had tremendous impact on the troops as a whole, and probably helped them keep their resolve and help win the battle out of proportion to the size of his own personal command.
It was the most wonderful example to everyone.
A major firing at tanks is something you don't hear of, really.
We all wanted to emulate him, of course, which we tried to do to our best ability.
The effect that Major Robert Kaine had on the men was obviously his leadership, and the fact that they were on the defensive, but he was moving, he was showing himself, he was rallying where there was the greatest danger, and that has the most huge impact upon people who have just got to stay there and endure and be brave. They need something to focus upon. He was that focus.
Leaders lead from the front and they inspire their men, which is exactly what he did here.
He led by example completely. I mean, I'm sure that whoever got back over that river of the South Staffords could owe that fact to Bob Kaine. Nobody else, because it was his example that rallied them.
His bravery was suicidal and utterly selfless. His tank-killing antics rallied the troops, beat off the enemy, and helped keep the defences at Oosterbeek intact. These were the reasons why this man won a Victoria Cross.
And not just any VC either. According to his commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Derek McCarty, it was the finest Victoria Cross of the whole war.
After the Germans withdrew, the British, out of ammo, food and ideas, and knowing by this stage that the Second Army wasn't coming, silently crossed the river at night to safety. Kaine knew they were retreating, but he didn't want to look beaten.
When they were in utter defeat by the river, withdrawing over the river, the battle was lost. He found a razor, and somehow he shaved, so that at least he would go back looking respectable and like an officer above his men. Amazing man.
Kaine was awarded his Victoria Cross at Buckingham Palace on the 2nd of November 1944, the first Manxman ever to get one. But like many other VC winners, he was never very comfortable with all the ballyhoo and fuss. Kaine was the only one of 5 VC winners at Arnhem who lived to tell the tale. Not that he would tell the tale, of course. VC winners rarely do. And that's a pity, because Kaine's tale is one of how many more young men, how many more teenage soldiers might have died had he not fought quite so ferociously. He died of cancer in 1974.
Sadly, that meant I never met him, which is a shame for 2 reasons. Firstly, because I'm absolutely fascinated by VC winners. And secondly, because I'm married to his daughter. She didn't even know he'd won a Victoria Cross until after he'd died. He never thought to mention it.
Many people had warned me that there was a twist at the end of this video, and I guess that was it.
You know, We've a rather warped sense of what constitutes bravery these days. I mean, even David Beckham is called a hero for scoring a penalty. But when you look at VC winners and hear their stories, well, enough said.
Please go to the original video and give them a like. We owe so much to all these veterans, regardless if they earned a Victoria Cross or not. We owe them everything. I really enjoyed this video, and I hope that you guys also enjoyed me reacting to it. Once I react to his film on the Greatest Raid, I'll put it right here. And this is a docuseries all about the British Parachute Regiment. And down below, I will link some videos on some Medal of Honor and Victoria Cross recipients. Thank you guys so much for watching. The cheapest way to support the channel is just to watch some more videos, or you can always just give me a like, sub, comment, share. Thanks.